First, a story that I just had to tell you today. It was the summer of 1955, and a Swedish sailor by the name of Åke Viking was far from home. You can laugh all you want at a Swedish sailor with the surname of Viking, but sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And all that Åke saw every day were the waves and the ocean and the sky on his fishing boat. He was far from land on a journey across the North Atlantic, and each day was a monotony of water and waves until it was almost maddening. And in his boredom, with nothing but daydreams to occupy him, Viking did something rather silly, something he'd read about in storybooks. He took an old glass bottle, stuffed it with a simple message, and cast it out into the ocean. And he watched the bottle bob along with the ocean current for several long minutes until it passed from view, carried away by the tides. Months later, and hundreds of miles away, a young Sicilian woman named Paulina was walking along the beach, wistfully daydreaming in her own way, when she saw the glint of something poking out from the sand. It was a glass bottle, and she saw there was a note inside and quickly uncorked it. She gingerly opened the paper to read what was written, and it was addressed to someone beautiful and far away. An address was given in Sweden. Paulina wrote a letter to Åke, and the two began a correspondence. And 3 years later, after many letters had changed hands, the couple married. During this time, the story leaked to the press and became something of a popular sensation in Sicily because local newspapers recorded that in 1958, at their wedding, some 4,000 people attended the ceremony. Paulina and Åke had, by all accounts, a wonderful relationship, and they remained married for the next 43 years until the sailor's death in 2001. Take that, Match.com. Sometimes a message really needs to get out. And when it finds the right person to receive it, it makes all of the work worthwhile. I hope you will forgive me for introducing a rather serious topic with a lighthearted story, but sometimes Jesus employed analogies that appear to be kind of frivolous: a treasure in a field, a pearl of great price, some yeast in the dough. To me, there's something rather profound about a message in a bottle that connects the lives of two people living worlds apart. The right message, finding the right person at the right time, can literally change the course of our lives and even of history. Some messages need to be shared. They need to spread, and when they do, they light a fire that changes lives. We know so little about the man who would become the first Christian martyr. His name was Stephen, we're told, and he was well known in the first generation of the church as a man called to be set apart as a diakonos, or a servant of the widows and of the poor. This young deacon, this servant, was altogether too good at his new job, I think. And as the book of Acts tells us, it was only a short while before his preaching about the message of Jesus and his works of service were labeled as blasphemy by the religious leaders of the day. Like any good preacher with a prophetic voice, Stephen had said a little too loudly and a little too often a powerful message of love and hope. He was becoming too influential, the religious leaders believed. And so they began to agitate against him until the crowds turned into a mob. Stoning is a brutal and ugly business. And the ones who perpetrated this mob violence took off their cloaks in the hot sun and laid them at the feet of another young man named Saul, who would remember that day for the rest of his life. And in fact, that day would change the entire course of history. Outside the city, the mob gave in to their wrath while Stephen prayed for his killers. "Lord, do not hold this sin against them," he said, which echoes Jesus' own words from the cross. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." In this way, Stephen became the first martyr of the Christian faith, but he would be far from the last. It's worth remembering that all but one of the 12 apostles were martyred. Peter would later be crucified in Rome. Thomas would travel on a missionary journey to India before being killed there. Matthew met his end in Ethiopia. Simon, it is said, in Britain. James, the son of Alphaeus, was also stoned. Only St. John, of all the apostles, our tradition records, died quietly in bed, and even he was in exile. Christians would continue to be martyred by the Roman government for 300 years, living in persecution, meeting in secret, hiding in fear, but always lifting up a flame of truth, a message that they had to share. In the centuries that followed, everywhere that Christians went, they would also become martyrs. In Africa, in Asia, in the New World, they would die for their faith. Isaac Jogues was a Jesuit who died in North America while preaching the faith. Francis de Capellius was killed in China while ministering to the sick. Thomas Baker was killed preaching in Fiji. More recently, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was sent to a Nazi concentration camp for his agitation against Hitler. Some, in fact, far too many, were also killed by other Christians. Jan Hus, William Tyndale, our own Thomas Cranmer, for being the wrong kind of Christian at the wrong time, you might say, or for having the audacity to challenge the established norms of the society in which they lived. There were thousands of them, thousands, who would pay the ultimate price for their faith. And because of this long and often bloody history, the word martyr entered the English language to mean someone who dies on behalf of their religious conviction, whether because they upset the powers that be, or because of the sincerity of their commitment, or because of their sheer zealotry sometimes. But that was not the original meaning of the word. It's only the way it has been used in English. The word martyr comes from the Greek, and it simply means witness. That's what it means. Witness. In ancient times, to be a martyr meant to be a witness to something. A witness in the sense that you are bearing a message. You're telling a truth. You're getting the word out. Affirming something which is important to you. Witness in this sense is like the witnesses we call in court cases. A witness who takes the stand to tell the truth under oath. A martyr does much the same thing. They witness by telling the truth, by proclaiming the gospel, by spreading a message that lights hearts on fire, a message of good news. But there are many ways of giving witness to our faith. One of my favorite aphorisms about the Christian life comes from St. Francis of Assisi, who used to instruct his monks to preach the gospel at all times and, if necessary, use words. Preach the gospel at all times, he told them, and if necessary, use words. And you hear the emphasis there. I think it's really important because for Francis, what mattered about preaching the gospel was not the words that were said. It wasn't the clever theological arguments that were made or the good illustrations or how slick the sound and light show was before the sermon. No, what mattered to Francis was that the gospel was lived out. Talking about it only went so far. Living it was something else entirely. See, in a sense, we are all called to be martyrs, not because we will die for our faith, God forbid. I certainly don't want that. But in the sense that we are called to witness to a truth by word and deed, but especially by deed. Witnessing to the gospel, being a martyr for it, is not about what we say nearly as much as it is about what we do. Actions, as everyone knows, speak louder than words. And yet, many of our fellow Christians spend far more time fretting about their words and their beliefs than they do over whether they actually live the faith that they claim. See, the thing is, folks, I don't care, and frankly, I don't think God particularly cares what you say or believe about the vast majority of theological and doctrinal minutiae. But I do believe that God cares very deeply about how we live, about what we do, about how we act and treat each other. Jesus told his disciples that the rest of the world would know they were his followers if they loved one another. That was the thing that people were going to look for. And in today's gospel, Jesus says that the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. And then he says something amazing. He says, and even greater works than these. Things greater even than Jesus himself did. That's an incredible statement. If you believe me, you will do the works that I do. Not, mind you, talk about it on weekends, but ignore the implications. Belief leads to works, to actions, Jesus says. What are the works that Christ did? I think you know the answer to that. It was a living action of love that would set his true followers apart from others. Which to me means that what matters about the martyrs isn't actually their death, but their life. Does someone's life actually witness to the beliefs they claim to hold? That is the essential factor. If I claim to be a Christian but have no concern for the poor or the least of these, how am I witnessing to the message of Jesus? Not well. If I claim to be a Christian but do not practice the ethics of Christ in my daily life, what will be the message that others receive from me? Will it be one that glorifies God? Or will people look at me and say, his faith has no relevance to his life. Where are the fruits of the Spirit? Remember in this story, in the book of Acts, that those who stoned Stephen, it said, laid their coats at the feet of a young man named Saul. That's kind of a throwaway line in this chapter of Acts, but it actually has enormous implications. This Saul, you see, was an inquisitor, a persecutor, and a killer of Christians. But Stephen's righteous life of service, his holy death, would never be forgotten by Saul. The message reached him too, and his heart was turned. And one day on a road to Damascus, Saul fell off his donkey, and when he got up, he would henceforward become known as Paul of Tarsus, apostle to the Gentiles. He saw the witness. He saw the martyrdom of Stephen, and it would change not only his life, but the entire course of history that followed. And he too would become a martyr. To be a martyr is to be a witness. That is its original meaning. It is to carry a truth of such profound value that it must be shared. It's like a message in a bottle that once heard, once read, cannot help but change the course of our lives forever. A message from far off that somehow still manages to call us home. Each of us can be a witness to that message. And that message is not some abstract or theoretical concept. It is expressed every time we treat another person with dignity and respect, because in loving them, we also love Christ. It is confirmed every time the Holy Spirit bears fruits of love and joy and peace in our lives. It is renewed each and every time we minister to the poor, the friendless, and the needy, and we serve each other in community. So let our lives be a witness. Let our actions be a witness. Let us preach the gospel at all times and use words only when really necessary. And may God give us the strength and grace to do so. In his holy name.